And there's 3 people, so it's one of them.
You're live, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. This is welcome, folks. This is Tuesday. What's the date? April 18th. House Corrections and Institutions Committee. We're meeting, our first meeting of the day, the afternoon meeting. And we're going to spend a little bit of time on ARPA dollars. These are ARPA funds that were put in the budgets last year and the year before. We had a preliminary review of all this with Dan Dickerson last week on Thursday. So this is a document that is dated Thursday, April 13th, and it's under the name of Doug Farnham. And we're taking testimony on these individual projects from respective departments to see what the plan is to get these dollars out the door. And just to get some context of this, this is new information for this committee because these decisions were made over the past couple of years. So it's a way to let folks know that there's other dollars besides the capital dollars that are to go towards projects that we are funding through the capital bill. So the first one we're looking at today is BGS with stormwater planning. We have Joe Asia from BGS. So Joe, why don't you come on up to the hot seat? And this is $600,000 for stormwater planning, the 3 acre. And we saw on the sheet here that there is spending authority that has been issued for FY23, but no dollars have gone out the door to date. So we just want to know where the status of this is and what that 600 would be used for specifically and how that dovetails with our 1.5 for FY24.
Okay.
Okay, that's simple, right?
Sure. For the record, Joe Asia, Director of Design and Construction for Buildings and General Services. So on the stormwater, we have gone out to bid. We received 5 bids on the sites that we have out there that we have to address for stormwater. We have narrowed it down to 3 firms for all of our sites. So 7 sites that we have to deal with. And we are in the process right now of executing those contracts. The total contract amount for all 3 firms at this point in time that we're anticipating is $405,493.
Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
405,493.
For those 7 sites.
Is
that just the planning?
That is design through construction and administration.
So it includes construction?
Yes, the construction administration of that from the designer's side. It is not the contractor to construct. So the engineer will set in all the design on the construction meetings, take notes, make sure that the contractor is performing according to the plans and specifications.
So the design is for the design and through construction, but it doesn't include the construction.
That is correct. We need to complete the design first, and we're anticipating that we're starting May 1st for the design, and that we should be completed for construction in November of 24.
So the actual construction would be
those would be the yes.
24.
Now, that's the best guess we have of what we know today. When we go to, I think my worst site really is going to be here in Montpelier on the complex and how best to address the stormwater. We may do additional surveys looking for ledge and the likes of that and have to come up and create a different plan or maybe even part of the buyout. I'm not sure yet, but those are all the things that we have to look at, and that may change not only the duration for the design, but also for the construction. But that's way far out right now.
So there's 7 sites. Is
Yes.
that total for BGS, the 7 sites?
That is correct.
And for the Capitol Complex here,
Yes.
the design documents, the design work will start May 1st of this year. And the goal is by November of 2024, all the construction will be completed.
Yes.
The wild card is what do we do with a complex? You may run into more in the capital complex than you think.
Right.
We're also put money in the capital bill for Aiken Ave. Is that gonna impact this or vice versa?
No. The reason being, we're not looking to address anything on Aiken Avenue itself and or the tunnel that goes with the waterproofing of the tunnel. But what we have done over the past few years, knowing that this is coming, is we've held off on paving our parking lots. So some of them are in pretty poor shape, knowing that this is coming. And in some cases, because we don't have a place to do stormwater ponds and the likes, it would be some type of underground filtration system. And the best place for that would be under our parking lots. So that's why we've held off on paving. But Aiken Avenue should be fine.
But I thought we were doing some work on Aiken Ave.
We are repaving Aiken Avenue, and underneath a portion of Aiken Avenue is the tunnel that connects 133 to 111, and we are waterproofing that tunnel. So we're going to begin with waterproofing under Aiken Avenue and paving it, and then in an out year, we do the remainder of that tunnel waterproofing.
So waterproofing under Aiken Ave, does that include any of the stormwater remediation?
It does not. It's digging a trench on both sides of the tunnel, waterproofing it, and putting the earth back around it, compacting it, and then paving Aiken
Because the
Avenue.
tunnel goes underneath the Aiken Ave.
Yes, it does.
So the decision's been made to do the waterproofing from the outside, not the inside.
Right now, that's where we're headed until we get a designer on board. But yes,
For the tunnel.
yes.
Yeah.
But I don't want to pull that trigger and, say we're going to do it from the inside paved and then find out we cannot.
So you have the spending authority for the FY23 of the 600,000. When do you anticipate that going out the door?
May 1st.
May
We are
1st, when the
hoping we are
design
going to
starts.
start our designs, and that's on all of them. Some will go faster than others. One of the sites that's relatively easy is Middlesex General Services site. We are 1/10 of an acre over the 3-acre rule. Yes, so looking how to shave that, and that is without the therapeutic residence there, is to what can we do to the pavement and whatnot to shave it and not have to go through the 3-acre rule.
So would that be tied to any of the money we put in for the master plan for
No.
demolition of the?
No. Because the therapeutic, as I said, the 3 acres that we were looking at does not include that building or their walks to the building.
I apologize.
So
Well,
even with taking out those modular units and taking up the walkway or any paving that might be for parking for those, that still doesn't help the 3-acre parcel piece. for the
Correct,
rest of
it
the-
does not.
Is there anything we could do in that remediation part of taking those modules
It's
out?
the best way to shave off 1/10 of an acre. I can't really shave the building, so I'll be shaving the drives and the walks and looking at turning radius for the trucks coming in. I got to do a little bit of a study first before I can answer where we're going to, or if we can shave that off.
Just seems like we're possibly doing some changing of that property. If we can get rid of the modulars, might
Mhm.
give some opportunity there, but maybe not.
Right, and the modulars are, if we had to do any type of stormwater, the modulars are uphill. So the runoff is going in the opposite direction, unfortunately. So if I was to do stormwater pond, removing the modulars, that's not a good location for the pond.
Questions? So total for 3-acre stormwater. So the 600,000 is just for design documents to get us ready for construction at the 7 sites. So we have 1.5 million FY24 and 1.5 million FY25. That 3 million is just for these 7 sites, or is there also planning dollars in that 3 million for some other sites?
It is just the 7 sites. When we put that price together a while ago, that's what we're looking at and having to do complete full-blown stormwater. And I still don't know if I can shave anything in Middlesex. So that's why we're still carrying the full construction cost there of having to do a stormwater pond, just in case I can't reduce the radiuses of the trucks that pull into there.
And I know in the testimony that was given on that 1.5 million, some of these projects might be very quick and can get done really fast, and then some may take longer and go into FY25.
Yes, that is correct.
Questions? Thoughts? That was easy, Joe.
So I like the easy ones, and that 405, those are all the ARPA dollars, the 400,000. So
Right, so then there'd be a little left from that 600,000.
yes, correct. To add to that to construction, right? Yeah,
And that can go to construction.
and looking at our timeline right now, we would be able to spend that for the first project that goes to construction. So we would finish spending the ARPA dollars.
And we get that out in time because they have to be done by December of 24.
What was the total construction estimate?
I don't recall, but I have to go back and look and look.
You got about $200,000 there.
Yeah.
95 or so.
The ARPA dollars have to be expended.
Obligated by 24 and spent by 27, I believe.
No, isn't that your, I'm not sure. Doug, can you respond to that? When do they have to be obligated by? And then when does it have to be fully expended? Doug Farnham has.
Yes, Madam Chair. Doug Farnham, Deputy Secretary for AOA for the record. The dollars have to be obligated under the Treasury's definition by December 31st of 2024. So Treasury means that as a grant or contract with an external party. So appropriation or allocation internally between agencies, none of that counts. It has to be in a contract with a third party. And then 12/31/2026 is when it has to be expended by. So we have 2 years after that obligation deadline to fully expend all of the funds.
And Doug, what if, and this is a bigger picture, it's not targeted to the 600, but what if some of the funding of the ARPA dollars are not obligated by December 31st, 24? What then happens with that? Do we lose that?
So Treasury hasn't released specific guidance yet, but we believe that, yes, we would be at risk of losing dollars that are not obligated as of that 12/31/2024 date. With the Coronavirus Relief Fund obligation deadline, they took a pretty hard stance on that and said your obligations have to be locked in. You'll not be able to create any new obligations. And that's one reason, obviously the 2024 legislative session will be the last major opportunity for the General Assembly to reappropriate ARPA dollars. And then with Coronavirus Relief Fund, we used the state, when I say we, I mean the state of Vermont, gave the Joint Fiscal Committee process to approve reallocations of coronavirus relief funds. And a similar approach might be considered to empower the Joint Fiscal Committee to do some limited reallocation within existing ARPA programs approved by the General Assembly. And the other element at play is if we establish, there's also a measure we can take in our approach to contracting, is that if we contract or grant for multiple projects, if one of those projects doesn't go forward, but we're able to complete other projects to fully expend the funds, then that will allow us to expend the funds. So we just we can also, when we set up our contracts, make sure there's a little bit of flexibility in there, as long as they're being spent, of course, on the legislatively approved purpose.
So that raises a question. We've got other funds. I mean, we've got other projects in here that are particularly 3-acre stormwater, and it goes to Forests and Parks, as well as Department of Environmental Conservation. as well as BGS. So are you saying, Doug, that you could lump all of those three items, designations, be it BGS, DEC, and forests and parks, because they're all connected with 3 acres? Stormwater remediation, could all those contracts be lumped together? Is that what you're saying? Or not?
Madam Chair, I do think I was more thinking about the projects within each department, but that is an excellent question. And I think it's possible that we might be able to do something along those lines to protect the state and to make sure that as long as those monies are being spent on the legislatively approved purpose, then yes, we might be able to have an MOU situation where we make sure it's going towards 3 acre stormwater if there's, but as Director Asia said, if construction starts and we've put construction in scope, then I think the leftover of the 600,000, for instance, would be easily consumed by some of those construction costs. But yeah,
That pertains to BGS, but
yes.
yeah. But I'm just looking if other departments aren't successful in getting out like the 3 acre parcel work, if all of that could be lumped together. You also have some in AOT 3 acre parcels. So that we don't start money.
Yeah, it's an excellent question and something we can explore, particularly since BGS has that authority to set up retainer style agreements and to have other departments, procure goods through their authority. It might be possible under that type of authority to kind of move things together. I think that traditionally we tend to separate the projects, and obviously we'd still track the project expenditures separately. But we do need to be a little bit creative as you're pushing for, Madam Chair, to protect ourselves from, because if we set up exclusive contracts for each project and then that project ends up not being completed or costing as much as we thought, we won't be able to shift those funds to a different obligation in 2025 and 2026. So I think as long as we set up the contracts with a little foresight, we should be able to avoid a negative outcome there.
Just thinking.
Yeah.
That's all. Just thinking. Because there's also other items I'm seeing here in the list that you submitted, Doug, to the Appropriations Committee in the House. There's also other items that stormwater rule. And I don't know if that's specific for the 3 acre, but there's stormwater rule for forests and parks that's on top of the 3 acre. And then there's stormwater permitting for DEC that's at 30 million. And I don't know if that would all linked in together with the 3 acre parcel, because it's all going towards stormwater and remediation of the TMDL. I mean, those are big chunks of money. Does the committee follow what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So just the thought.
just the structure of how having one pot of ARPA money that you could match with other money and draw for the different departments. That's what you're talking about.
Well, if one department can't use it all up
Right.
for
So
that particular project,
right.
or maybe there's a cost overrun, another department has got the same 3 acre parcel, but they're not gonna get it all out the door. Can those dollars be shifted?
I'm just trying to think of and that, of course, let's take Fish and Wildlife. Of course, Fish and Wildlife might be matching with angler dollars or whatever, and so it shouldn't be a problem because the ARPA money is not like it's money that would be for a diversion or anything like that. And if you lump them all together, I don't see why you couldn't do that. But I don't know how they would go about accessing that pot. Because they wouldn't have it in their budget if it was a single pot. How do you access it?
I think that's over Joe's head. Joe's only working on the 600,000. That's a question for
Deputy
Doug
Secretary.
in terms of how the contracts are negotiated and signed off. That's how,
And see, I'm looking at it, how does the agency pay the contractor? When this money, some of this money could be in a shared pot. I don't know that.
did you hear that question, Doug?
Yes, Madam Chair. There are a couple approaches we could use if we ended up with a shared prod approach. So with the AOA appropriation for administrative costs, in that case, we use an interdepartmental transfer process with an excess receipts request. And it's a little bit, it is documentation. It takes time to do, but it's not too onerous. The other approach would be to place the pot of money at one department and then allow them to set up MOUs with the other departments. So as long as the lead agency or department authorize the use, then the bills would go straight to the one agency or department that holds that appropriation. I do think under the current law, because all of the different 3-acre appropriations were set up with explicit focuses, I do think our authority in the administration to move money around, even though they're all 3-acre stormwater, they're focused 3-acre stormwater. So I do think the administration's current authority to shift funds between those programs would be quite limited. Unless there was a legislative change authorizing movement between that explicit list of appropriations.
So you would need some legislative authority to do the movement between, have you ever thought of that, or is this brand new?
Madam Chair, we've thought about it in similar contexts. And I think that, I do think that there will need to be some shifting around of the funds, of the ARPA funds, especially as we get into the second half of 2024. The more explicit and known that shifting can be beforehand, the easier it is for the General Assembly and the executive branch to agree, right? If it's like, if funds within this policy bucket of water can be shifted to, and if you're going with stormwater permitting, then or stormwater compliance, then you're even going a level more specific than that, right? You're saying this specific list of appropriations, it would probably be the Commissioner of Finance and Management's authority to approve transfers between this list of programs. So you're giving a very limited authority to shift money around, but to the same exact high-level policy purpose. I was planning to ask for similar language to that at some point, Madam Chair. And I think it's great to start the conversation this session, and maybe even if it means reaching a place of comfort next session. Sometimes it takes a little while to work through some of these concepts.
Well, my concern is that we wait to next session, none of this will get resolved until May. And then you have to get the money out, obligated, and construct. You have to at least get it obligated by the end of December in 2024. So it's only going to leave you 6 months to get all that money obligated. So I'm just concerned that's really bumping up. If there's anything we can do this session for at least some of these projects, because when I'm looking through basically our world, we've got the 3-acre, you've got stormwater permitting. I'm looking at your list here, Doug, that you submitted. And then we've got also access roads, that's within forests and parks. I just think that it just looks like there's some items that could be connected and merge pretty easily, but maybe not. And I would think if we could do something in the remaining 3 weeks of the session, would at least help on some of this. Right?
But would we actually have to do any, if, I mean, some of those, if you knew some of those projects were just gonna go, then you could assign the ARPA money to whatever that department or agency is, and not have to worry about having a pot of money for those particular ones. But what we're worried about is if some of those don't go and we parse that money all out, and some of the other ones could have used it, then you're not going to be able to backtrack so that you can actually use that money. So the question then, so for me, the question is there some ways you don't have to have the complications of having MOUs and dealing with a single pot of money, and on the ones that are ready to go, parse those out, do it the normal way. And then if there are, some that we're concerned that lumping the money, that if we don't lump the money, we may lose the money because they can't use it and somebody else could have, kind of thing. But then how do you set that up so that you had a pot of money, that you had MOUs all set to go, where they could draw the money with an interagency transfer when it was necessary? And Doug, would you then suppose that pot of money, that there would be the single agency where the pot of money resides, would they be the ones doing all the reporting to ARPA, to the feds?
Yes. Well, everything rolls up through agency of administration for the reporting to the Treasury. So at the end of the day, we'd have to collect them. But if the funds went to the if the policy purpose were identical and then they were able to do an MOU to transfer the funds over, it would probably include the responsibility to report to AOA on those funds. But I do think in the spirit of problem solving, and this is just an idea that I'm putting out there, not necessarily something that's been fully discussed with other members of the administration, I would say that we found the Joint Fiscal Committee overview and approval of reallocations to be a pretty reasonable and appropriate process, and that gave the General Assembly some control over, over those reallocations. So if there were reallocation authority that we wanted to work on at this point in this session, I think it probably would make sense to be something that the Commissioner of Finance and Management proposed to the Joint Fiscal Committee, and then could additionally have some policy guardrails. Like, I think, these categories of clean water, broadband, administrative and climate action, economy, workforce and communities, and housing, those were the legislature's kind of buckets as managed by the Joint Fiscal Office. And I think that the kind of guardrails for the Joint Fiscal Committee could be to keep any reallocations within the policy area that was originally appropriated by the General Assembly, so that we're not taking water investment and moving it down to housing, for instance, right? That would be more of a decision for the General Assembly if you're changing the policy lane.
So I would almost think, Doug, that you want to be able to have the Joint Fiscal Committee the ability to do this coming summer and fall, and not wait until next year. Because when I'm looking at your sheet, and granted it may need to be updated, but right now only 38% of the $1 billion has been obligated, and only 15% has actually been expended.
Correct, Madam Chair. And I think one of the main reasons for those numbers is that if you look, we're at about 60% of the dollars that were appropriated in the 2021 session have been obligated. So I do expect that we've been picking up momentum, and we built our 2022 programs much more quickly than we built the 2021 round. we're going to be doing an annual report in July, which will be a deeper dive on status for all of these programs. When I discussed it with House Appropriations, it's likely that we would have outcomes and conclusions to present to the Joint Fiscal Committee in September of this year, kind of getting more into how are we doing? Are we on track? Are we behind at this point? Do we see any programs that the legislature created very few short-term programs? Most of them are programs we expect to run most likely right up until the end of 2026. But yes, it would be very possible that this September we would have a short list of programs that we could present to the Joint Fiscal Committee for, hey, this program has been scoped out. We think it will only run this amount of money, and we're comfortable requesting a reallocation to this other area where we're oversubscribed, et cetera. I know we had 3 programs that were oversubscribed of ARPA dollars: the Healthy Homes Initiative, the Flood Resilient Communities program, and the Vermont Housing Investment Program. I haven't gotten a report of any other programs being oversubscribed at this point. But I do think our quarterly data is being collected right now. And within a week and a half, likely we'll have consolidated the quarterly report data. The spreadsheet that Mr. Dickerson shared is based on data through December 31st. So I am looking forward to see if our pace is picking up in the first quarter of 2023, which we do tend to establish a lot of contracts and obligations in the first quarter of the year. But of course, the second quarter, April through June, is really when a lot of activity occurs for our construction-based programs.
So have you had any conversations with the House Appropriations Committee or Senate Appropriations Committee about this reallocation opportunity for Joint Fiscal Committee?
A brief conversation, Madam Chair, during my kind of question and answer type style testimony at House Appropriations. We did talk through this timeline a little bit, and I did talk about the potential for the Joint Fiscal Committee to be an avenue for the authority, but I didn't make any requests at that time. I think we were still, I think House Appropriations was trying to get a lay of the land as far as when we'll know how much we'll know at different points in time, and when the legislature will need to take action in order to protect us. I do have a couple of other strategies to protect the state. If programs are unable to expend their funds to their original policy purpose, there's a couple backup strategies that can be deployed. And those could be deployed in 2024.
Okay. You have the easy one, Joe.
Good.
This
Nice
is
to
how-
have an easy one for once.
This is helpful, Doug. There may be further conversations in other places in this building. I'm just not sure yet. Is Forest and Parks due to come in? They were due at 1:30.
They're right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I am
You're
sorry.
sitting in the corner. Anything else for Joe? Thank you, Joe.
Michelle? Thank you. You're not gonna go through
To which
the
one?
1.5? That's okay. We'll skip.
Oh, the 1.5, that's for the State House.
The State House,
expansion. Yeah, go through that
You
one.
sure?
I wasn't there.
Danny really wants to come up. She sat here a long time.
He's trying to get out of here.
I could have
I didn't
gone,
think we
but
were gonna, we're not gonna be able to get that out the door. are we?
yes, we are. We are right now in the works of drafting the contract. And with that, the total dollar amount for ARPA funding will be $618,105.
State House expansion.
Mhm.
Yes. Or mitigation. ARPA won't let us say expansion, but yes,
So-
that is the ARPA funds of that. There's another $90,432 for additional things that we're looking at, and that is going to come out of planning funds for the planning phase.
Out of your planning.
Yes, looking at the MIST system the code review. There was a third item not there.
So of the 1.5 for the State House mitigation, 618,000 would be for the contract, and that would be eligible totally for those ARPA dollars?
That is correct. And
Now, the contract would be for design.
it runs all the way, just like stormwater. It was sent out all the way from programming through the end of construction administration. And so based on what we know so far going into it, there's a balance of 881,000 and change that would still be left out there for construction.
If it can be used.
That is correct.
So when do you anticipate the design through the end of the construction administration? What's the time frame there? Do you anticipate?
I have to go back and remember my slides, but we're looking at, for the end of planning phase, we're looking at the end of June. Last time I spoke to the
So we're
architects.
already in the design piece?
Yes, well, we
The
released
Freeman
a
French Freeman?
letter of intent, so the contractor could start work. And they've been collecting data. But they do feel that by the end of June, that the planning phase would be complete. Now, at that point in time, it all depends when they actually get us a draft of that planning program to us. We review it and then get it back to them, how that, if it's, but we're looking at the end of June. Schematic design phase would then start shortly thereafter, and they anticipate to be done at the end of November. And through one end or both of those, having to stop to come back to a committee and show them what we have for findings.
Well, there would be a check-in at the June piece.
Right.
To then figure out if there's a couple options there to pick an option. And then the schematic design would then start for that option to be completed by the end of June.
And I don't know if we'll have a hard stop at November either, but
So that 618 would still be in play through the end of November.
yes. So the way it's broken out right now is the planning phase is $60,470. And these are ARPA funds. The schematic design phase is $61,210. So roughly $121,000
Mhm.
by November, and then November will be spent. The next phase could take roughly a year, depending on what the outcome is of programming and schematic design.
So that would bring us all the way through 24.
Yes. So it's possible that some of this could be committed, but probably not all of it for construction.
The 881.
Now, there could be additional testing that we have to find when we come through here or survey, if there's going to be an expansion and the likes of that. That is under additional services that they would then, we do a change order to the contract. Excuse me, change order to the contract for that. So I don't expect it would be that much money.
So this is definitely one to look at again next year because we're not going to even expend that full 618,000 by January.
Correct.
John?
A while back, the discussion on the State House expansion, there was some question about whether the ARPA money could be used at all, depending on the design. Does that have any restrictions on the
It has a
design team using the ARPA money?
The way the language came out is we just can't jump into, we need an addition. It has to go through the process, and that's why we're evaluating spaces to, under a pandemic, to look at it and say, okay, we need this much, this committee needs this much space. Look at the whole State House and we look at all of the properties that the legislature has control of, such as 2 and 4 acre. And look at that and say, you can or cannot put committee rooms there or somebody else in there along with the cafeteria and likes of that. So once that's all taken into account, if the only option that was remaining was that you had to do an addition to house 1 and or more committee rooms or the likes of that, yes, then the ARPA funds would allow that, in my understanding. But it's that process we have to go
Gotta
through.
fall in that box.
Yes. Yeah, it just can't be used for an expansion. You have to derive that by looking at all the options that we've explained, that, you go through these to evaluate. So this is, knocking out this wall and moving it 3 feet. If that took care of this committee, and that's the only committee that had an issue, then we're done.
Okay.
There's more to it than that, but I think, that is a very simple example, but those are the hoops that we're looking through right now to evaluate.
And then if we chose a design that didn't fall in that box, what effect would that have on the ARPA funds that we've committed?
I can
If we
answer
go-
that part, Joe, if you'd like.
Thank you.
Voice from the wall.
Sorry.
Can't beat those voices.
A deep voice from the wall.
Really?
So we're protected from the Treasury as long as our process properly contemplated the different options. If the legislature, if Vermont chose to go a different route for like not the minimum needed to mitigate risks, then we wouldn't be at risk of losing that funding. The planning process that we're funding still properly contemplated the issues and properly addressed pandemic mitigation. We tried to set it up so that it would mean that we couldn't use ARPA funds on any of the construction costs if that option was not necessary for pandemic mitigation. If it was, I guess, to put it bluntly, if it were overkill related to the outcome of the study, but it wouldn't mean we'd have to pay any of the ARPA back that we used on the planning.
Okay, that's all good.
Other questions on the State House? Keep working on it, Joe.
Trying. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Was it that bad? Even the one I had to remember.
What are the BGS lines with MER from? I have no idea what that is. Farther down the page.
Where are you? How far down?
I don't know.
That's the Muni.
Halfway?
That's the Muni Energy Resilience. Is that what you're looking at?
Yes.
Before you leave, Joe, they're talking about the new program that got put in place about your municipal assistance for energy projects.
That I do not know anything about.
There is, 2.4 million was put in there.
Yes.
And those are monies that go out to communities. 91% of them have been obligated. Those are your small grants that go out to communities for your municipalities for energy saving initiatives. And it's administered through BGS.
I think that program's underway.
Yes,
Yes.
it is. Yeah, it was put in place last year through
Right.
legislation that
Right.
came through Energy and Technology Committee.
And I think the assessments are just starting to, the
Something.
applications are just coming in.
Madam
That's what-
Chair,
Yes,
I
Doug?
apologize for jumping in. I do have to run to another obligation, but I am very, very familiar with that program. I helped oversee it and tried to get it moving forward on as quickly of a timeline as possible. So I'd be happy to come back to the committee and provide more details about that program as well at some point.
Okay, great. Thank you, Doug.
Okay.
Anything else? I think you're free, Joe.
Okay.
You can go back to work.
This isn't work.
This is work.
I know.
This is fine.
No, this is fun. You think? So. Forests and Parks,
Yes. Hi.
Forests and Parks, we have some items for you.
Good luck to you.
I'd be nervous.
Go on, sucker.
Yeah,
Not
no.
that hard. So Forests and Parks has 3 acres. They have access roads. And that's what we wanted to focus on. So there is also stormwater rule, which I'm a little confused on too.
Understood.
Pardon?
I get why.
Okay, so there's stormwater rule for $1 million. There's been no spending authority given. There is 700,000 for water quality access roads. That has not received spending authority. There's $500,000 that has received spending authority for that. And I think that's it for forests and parks. So Danielle, it's
Okay.
all yours. So if you could introduce yourself for the record, you don't have Doug to back you up.
I know.
So you're on your own.
For the record, Danielle Fitzko, Commissioner for the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation. And I'm happy to talk to you about our ARPA allocations to Forest, Parks and Recreation. I think I'll talk about the 3-acre stormwater one first, which there are 2 3-acre stormwater ones. The other one that says
$1 million.
there's 1 million allocations for stormwater, 3-acre stormwater. One was appropriated in FY22 and one was appropriated in FY23.
Mhm.
I think this committee knows what this is about, meeting the 3-acre stormwater rule. We have 19 parks that need work done to meet the stormwater requirements. And these funds will help us meet that regulatory requirement. For the first appropriation from FY22, we have 4 projects that are already under contract in 4 state parks. Most of them are nearly 50% complete. The second one that was appropriated in FY23, we have the project selected, and we're right now working through all the paperwork to actually get the spending authority approval. We anticipate starting those projects in October. Reality is, I think for these projects is that what we, at least in the first batch, what we anticipate the costs are going to be, they're over that now when you actually get to reality of it. So we don't anticipate having any trouble spending these $2 million associated with 3-acre stormwater.
So the monies that you're getting out the door right now is the $1 million from the FY22.
Correct.
And that's gone for your 4 projects that are currently under contract.
Yes. I can tell you what those are if you'd like.
Now, those contracts, is that the same? Does that also involve the actual construction? Or
Yes.
is- It does. The actual construction gets you through all the design and actual construction.
Yes. If you remember when we were testifying back in our capital budget, we asked for $250,000 for 3-acre stormwater. That helps us get prepped. This is actually getting us to build, install. So we've been accessing some funds to help us plan for meeting this regulatory requirement for a while. It's going to take us years, a couple more years to get through it all, but this is really needed construction capacity for us.
So what do you mean help us prep?
The identifying what sites actually needed a 3-acre stormwater permit, the design and engineering associated with it.
So that's on top of the $2 million that you're receiving from ARPA.
Yeah. So we're trying to get ahead and plan ahead, and then these ARPA dollars actually help us with the implementation.
So you're using state dollars for the planning portion.
Eventually, this $2 million will hopefully complete 8 parks, and we'll still have 11 more parks to go.
And you anticipate having those 8 parks by December of 2026, all constructed?
Yes.
But you will then have 11 parks left to do.
So we're still,
State's nickel.
maybe we'll find some other federal resources to help support that, but we know we have to meet these requirements, so we'll be broadly looking for funding to do that.
So you get estimated cost for the whole, well,
I don't know the estimated cost for the whole 11, we're still planning out on some of the other parks. Right now, we know for these 8, we estimate at least $2 million, probably could cost a little more when we actually get into the building implementation.
So you were here in the conversation we just had about kind of being able to possibly reallocate money between the same projects over different departments. Do you think that would help you or not?
I think it may make it, I think we have, I don't know if it would help us unless we could probably access more funding. I don't think we're gonna have any trouble spending the funding that we have, because we know we can probably always, if this $2 million was not being able to be spent on these 8 projects, which I don't foresee, we have more projects in the pipeline that we could add to the ARPA list.
so if a year from now you had everything going well and this is all obligated, but you had greater need, and if that pool was set up that we were discussing, the money that could you could access maybe through an interagency transfer, then if other projects and other arenas have unspent money that was in that pool, you might be able to get access to that and go
Right.
further.
What I think I heard Mr. Farnham say was at one point, sometime in the end of, well, I guess the beginning of FY24, they'll be looking for like what funds they anticipate having excess, and then maybe we can go after those funds.
Yeah.
And we should be primed and ready because we have the other funding that we're looking ahead with.
I mean, the one that I see on this list for just 3 acres is Department of Environmental Conservation. They have 5.5 million, and maybe they wouldn't get all of that out. And then you could tap that cost.
Within the agency, and I think those are being granted out.
Granted.
I think so. I don't think it's not on their it's not on DEC
Oh,
property.
so these are pass-through grants too,
I can't speak directly, but I can't, they're not, I expect that's what it
because
is.
they don't have that much property.
No, and they don't think they don't have any property that they'd be doing stormwater management on. They only have like 1,800 acres.
So where would they be contracted out to, do you think?
I think they'd be granting out, I don't know who, I don't know the
Granting out to who?
program.
No. I mean,
Municipalities.
what-
Probably municipalities, could even be, I'm not sure, I can't speak to it, but I can find out for you. Be happy
Just
to.
here, it's permit design, so I'm just.
Oh. I don't know. Maybe they're doing assistance for some municipalities or,
So what is Forests and Parks UCF? You know what that is?
yes, it's Urban and Community Forestry Program.
So that doesn't impact us at all in terms of our capital budget. Just
No,
trying to
it
link
doesn't impact the capital
some of
budget.
these ARPA dollars to our capital budget.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yes, that's urban tree planting.
So then the next one's your access road water quality. You had 700,000 in FY23 budget and 500,000 in the FY22 budget. And it's only the 500,000 in FY22 budget that has spending.
Well, that's new to me because we actually have, based on my records, we have spending authority and for both.
So when
And we just got that.
you just got
recently.
it, so this is really effective as of December 31st.
Okay, so we have a spending authority for both, and we're looking at them as one big pot of money.
Mhm.
And this is to meet our water quality requirements on our forest and parks access roads. We've talked about this. We have 600 miles of roads within our state forests and state parks and wildlife management areas. We've done an assessment of those roads like municipalities have done. So we've identified those areas, segments of roads that are hydrologically connected and where there's a discharge into waterways, so pollution loading. So we have a priority list of projects. And so we're working with BGS right now to actually look at contracting out all these funds at one time under one big statewide contract to look at those the highest priority needs across the state.
So we put in FY '24, the capital bill, we put in 550
Correct.
on top of this. So that would augment this
Yeah.
1.2 million.
We anticipate, based on the first batch of funds that we have, that the big amount that we'll eventually need will be 45 million. Certainly we can't even handle that right now, like reality, but we still want to make sure we're moving towards meeting the TMDL and our water quality goals.
So do you have enough staff to get out all of these, the $1.7 million?
Yes, that's been a big thought process for us as we learn how to scale up. Typically, we do staff manage each individual project. Now we're going to be working with BGS to do one big contract. We're going to bring on, one big contract to do a statewide project. So we're not managing multiple contracts across the state. So we're learning how to adapt to the amount of money that we have to get this out the door and on the ground.
And this contractor out there big enough to do it.
We anticipate there is. We don't think so. We have with the prioritization, we now have the road segments. I think we're pretty good shape to get the RFP out this spring.
Questions? This one was easier than BGS.
Wow, okay.
And I think that was it, just access roads, right? Am I missing something? In our sheet, I think that's the only one for forests and parks. I hope other committee members are looking at this, not just me.
I don't see any other ones.
Let's see, forests and parks.
Okay.
So I know folks have other things up on their computer screen besides the spreadsheet. So, anything else, folks?
I'm happy to come back anytime.
Thank you.
Good to
Jen.
see you.
That was
Thank you.
helpful.
Thanks.
So is this making sense to committee members?
Now this,
Other pieces. In the 585,000, that's for the municipal pollution grants, and we heard from Eric Black that they're working hopefully to get this out the door by this summer because they didn't have enough staff. And we haven't heard anything about the 600,000 from BHCB, and I know Phil was trying to schedule some folks for that. So this is educational. Okay. Anything else on this one?
It was DEC that was putting on all the limited term staff to deal with some of these things, right?
Yeah, they've been authorized for hiring folks. That's what Eric Blatt was saying. Because that was a concern, that they didn't have enough folks. And then they're hoping that the folks that they bring on can also work in terms of our clean water revolving loan fund, drinking water for the infrastructure, the federal infrastructure. Okay. Anything else on this before we shift gears? We're going to shift gears to S14. A little bit. Okay.
Sounds good.
So I've asked Representative Dolan to come in just to give us an update for S14. If you remember, folks, we had our joint meeting with House Judiciary in terms of some language that pertains to the Justice Reinvestment 2. And there was going to be this special fund that was going to be set up. And I think at the end of that meeting, we sort of decided, do we really do a special fund or not? And then there'd be sort of like this advisory committee that would kind of be looking at where do we invest our justice reinvestment dollars in. And we kind of left it that Karen and Troy would get together and kind of work up some language. And they've been in the process of doing that. And before any formal language is being submitted to House Judiciary, I thought it would be good if Karen came in just to give us an update in terms of sort of what direction they're moving in, because we're gonna have to weigh in on this as well, once the language gets formalized. So Karen, welcome back to your open meeting.
Yes. happy
You're
to be
sitting at the
back.
hot seat instead of sitting around the seat,
Yeah,
around the table.
happy to be
How
here.
does it feel? Kind of weird.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, what am I gonna do? Do I know what I'm talking about here? We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see.
So would it be helpful if I just gave an overview of what I've been doing
Yeah.
with Troy, and I've been doing some things on my own since Troy and I last met as well. So yes, so we had that joint meeting where I feel like we learned a lot of information. And the key piece of common ground I think we left that meeting with was that the advisory council folks supported. And again, looking at the goal of this is to find ways to coordinate the funding of justice reinvestment initiatives. So when you say justice reinvestment, I think that it can come two ways. There's like the big picture of which I kind of term justice reform initiatives. And then there was justice reinvestment initiatives, which are the small ones that are related to the out-of-state bed savings. And so we're like, okay, so we can create a council. Let's dive into that. So we reached out to stakeholders and came up with, where can we go with that? Can we go big? Can we ask these agencies, the Attorney General's office, DCF with the BARGE program, in DOC, to come together and look at that big justice reinvestment, look at all their justice reform initiatives, and kind of come up with a way of how can you coordinate that all the programs are being fully funded and implemented throughout the state, and who needs to be on that advisory council, and how will recommendations be made. And we've kind of been going back and forth of what is the appropriate step to take, to go big or to start small because it's manageable and build from there. And so we've had a couple different kind of drafts in the works, and we're hoping to finalize language today with all of the partners. And then we're taking testimony in House Judiciary tomorrow, hopefully confirm everything. So I think the hope is, I think we have a vote scheduled for Friday in House Judiciary for this, that we will vote it out. But basically what it's going to contain is, hopefully, we can get everybody to agree, some version of an advisory council that is going to give recommendations, hopefully at the very least, on that small justice reinvestment line item, the 900,000, and also come back with a report on ways that they can further collaborate and coordinate services going forward.
And they would report to who, in the legislature?
To the legislature. So it would be to probably both House and Senate, judiciary's corrections, and joint justice oversight.
And it would be specifically just for that 900,000 that sort of has been agreed to, at least on the House side, with
Yes.
conversations with members of your committee, with appropriations committee, with the administration.
Yeah.
That instead of really looking at these out-of-state beds and the savings, because that will fluctuate.
Yeah.
That there's just a base of every year, 900,000. It doesn't build from there. It stays at 900,000.
Yes. So that's what we're trying to get the language on right now, is to how to really define that in statute. So there's that piece. And then there's also, well, we have these kind of main players of justice reform in a room, this advisory council, can they also talk about what are the ways that the recommendations they have of how justice reform can be continued to be looked at? Coordinate community-based services, work on a funding implementation model, come back with some recommendations for us that we can use.
And who are some of the folks that you're looking at to be on this council?
Yes, so right now it's a council of 8, which is interesting, right? Because it's not an odd number.
but I think maybe it could work, is so DCF, DOC, the AG's office, Superior Judge. That's for Center for Crime Victim Services, the Crime Research Group, which is the data piece of it, and then 2 legislators.
One from the House, one from the Senate.
Correct.
And you've done away with the fund,
The fund is gone.
that special fund.
Yep, and what that council is going to do is it must consult with this whole list of stakeholders, which includes community justice centers, the network, I think it's Department of Mental Health, Office of Racial Justice, I forget, the parole board, there's a whole list of basically all entities that are involved in criminal justice reform.
They're gonna have a big ones.
Yeah.
So 900,000 general fund, just base funding, and bed savings goes back to the general fund. Or
You
does
mean
it
the
go
out of bed savings?
Out of state, bed
Yeah.
savings, or does that just go back to DOC?
So this is where I don't feel comfortable getting fully into the details yet because we haven't worked it out. The piece that I think that we're trying to come to is there a pot or line item of money that they are willing to work with, that they can come up with recommendations? I think that $900,000 line item, although it's within the DOC budget, I feel like there is more room for us to consider, like getting these common stakeholder input on it and recommendations, because all those entities are doing work with it, with those different community service providers.
And why should it be always just DOC that the money's funneled to?
And so I think that's up for conversation, right? Because DOC is where the bed savings are coming from too. So I think this is the step we're going to try to get to. Maybe we get more to it. At the very least, we're hoping that they can come together as a group and just come back with some recommendations of how we can better do this process going forward.
And next year we'll be back to changing.
Yeah.
The goal with justice reinvestment too was to get our community partners involved, because everything was falling on DOC when a person was re-entering from an incarcerated setting. Yeah, mental health services weren't coming up to the plate. Employment wasn't coming up to the plate. Substance use disorders. They were all just looking to DOC to provide all this. The Council of State Governments said, hey, wait a minute. This is a whole system, and why should it just be DOC and just them providing all this? You got to bring incentives for the other entities to come up.
And I'm still a little concerned about, those providers, and are we the accountability there? And so would this committee also be looking at that in terms of, are we getting value? Or do we feel comfortable with the value of the services that we're getting? Are the outcomes from those organizations good enough to justify what we're doing? That kind of thinking.
Yeah, so that is a part of what we are including in the task of the council, is that it's looking at data-driven strategies. And that's why I think it's another great piece that this is being added on to S14, which the original piece of S14 was around all that data collection. So I feel like this is tying those things together. Yes, collect all this data, and let's also talk about, so how are we going to use that data to inform the programs and services that we are funding for criminal justice reform? Yeah.
And we have to really start looking at, well, what kinds of data are there when we get multiple entities out there? Do we have some standardization so that we don't have garbage for data? Because it's the old story, garbage in, garbage out. So are we, and that, again, that group perhaps would have the staffing, background staffing to actually look at some of those things. So useful. Of course, $900,000.
It's
So a lot of money, not a lot of money to spend a lot of effort on.
but a starting point is what I'm seeing. And the big piece is having the crime research group be a part of it. They really understand the data and can kind of help point to what's really working and what makes sense. And I agree. There was part of me that in talking this really wanted to like look at every department, look at their entire budget devoted to criminal justice reform. But I just maybe it's something magical is going to
You
happen
wanted to do
tomorrow.
that last year and the year before.
Yeah. So well, I don't want to cancel it. Maybe it will still happen, but I feel like
It's a starting place.
it's a starting point.
And the data part, data collection, this 14 was a very delicate, was negotiated, and it's very delicate. So we don't touch it. Because once you touch it, you're gonna blow up all those agreements. It was negotiated, there was a lot of work that went into it to come up with a consensus. And the language reflects that consensus in terms of the data piece. What you're looking at, your committee, and what we're looking at indirectly is that justice for investment piece and how we can define that program better instead of doing it year by year by year.
Yeah.
And having it so volatile, not knowing what the net savings.
If you defined it, as you defined it, better, it might be a lot simpler. The data might be simpler. You may not need all the data available. You might need a piece of it, which might make it a lot easier to collect and a lot more consistent and reliable to get answers from.
Yeah. That's why I see this as a step. I'm going to be honest, I would say I was frustrated with like it, and I think it's going to be maybe similar to how the data piece of it kind of came together of like, it is going to be like, okay, this is the language that everybody could get common ground and agree upon, and it might not be the ideal, but it's a starting point. So.
Questions, thoughts?
Yeah.
Comments?
I like this direction. I think it's like you both said, it's kind of transition language, right? It's not going to be where we ultimately land, but you put some smart people in a room and hopefully you set up the framework so we have what we need to make some decisions when we go forward. So I think it's better than what we had. And I think it could be
What
better.
do we have?
Not much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
So I appreciate hearing that because it has taken me a little bit of time to get there. I'm like, wait, why are we doing this? And one of the pieces that I did, it's like, do we even need to have this in legislation? Because it really is just saying, okay, can you people come together in a room and work together? And some of the feedback I got was like, no, technically, no, like this could happen without, but when you have a list of all the things in legislation that you do need to do, and there's this one thing that isn't required by legislation, which things are you going to prioritize? So I was like, let's make sure we're in that priority column.
So one thing that is rattling around in my brain, and I don't know if we should take a look at this, maybe this committee here, or if you folks should ask the question. 2 years ago, on the first round with Justice Reinvestment 2, we appropriated $400,000 to the Department of Mental Health to provide services. As of last year, when we looked at this in committee in May, they still did not get the money out the door. And I haven't thought to follow up on that this year, and I don't know if anyone has, but the Department of Mental Health is not connected to anything here in the council.
We have them as that they would need to be consulted with.
Be consulted.
Yep. In the latest draft that we have, that they are on that long list of who the council needs to consult with: Department of Mental Health, Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs, Office of Defender General. They're included in that
We'll
list.
probably have a request for 3 more.
I know, which,
That's what happens.
yes.
But I'm just concerned that we did sign 400,000. And as of last year in May, it still had not gone out the door, and they've had it for over a year. Not then the testimony we receive, well, what do we do with this? We don't know what to do with this. What's to be targeted towards folks who are reentering.
Yeah.
So I
I
don't
think it
know
would
if
be
that
great.
money is still out there or not.
Weren't they gonna use that towards the specialty program in Burlington? I thought that that's what the funds were designated towards, and
I don't think so. As of last May, they hadn't spent it up. We haven't followed up this year.
Could be an opportunity to bring them in for testimony to see what's happening.
Was that a appropriation?
It was part of justice reinvestment too. Yes, it was in the budget.
Yeah.
And we put money to the network, and we put money to transitional housing. And we put money to, there was about 900 to $1 million that first round. And that was done during the 21 session when we were all on Zoom. And it was 400,000 that went to DMH. And when we did testimony at the beginning of last session, they didn't know what to do and what is this for. They even asked that when they received the money during the session in 21. We told them. And then even at the end of the session last year, we had them in the institutions committee. They still didn't know what to do with it.
So this committee recommended to appropriations? How did that
It
work?
came in through the budget adjustment process for the FY21 budget through Senator Sears, because that was all interconnected with justice reinvestment too, because he's intimately involved in justice reinvestment too. All started in the Senate in BAA, and then it got refined, and then monies were also included in FY22. It's been a mishmash to follow it, and that's what's been very, very difficult. And that's what Karen's attempt is through S14 and what she just presented to us. You get an amount you know is going to be there every year, number one. It's not based on the out-of-state life savings. We think, but we're not sure. And then there has to be some form of an allocation, and every year it could be different folks that are receiving parts of this money. But it's all in terms of the justice system and really targeting monies towards folks who are reentering from the incarcerated setting for successful reentry. They take it away from DOC providing all those services. Because right now, DOC is providing those services.
And so in the end, if there was an appropriation, there'd be a line item in DOC's budget, and it would be considered pass-through money that would be granted to these outside entities, and so they'd grant that money out. That would
That's
be,
what it is now.
is now, but it would be the same process, only the source of the money would be a general fund appropriation directly, rather than capturing money from bed savings from out of state.
I'm not sure if I'm following, but I think the plan would be probably that it would continue to be granted out.
Base funded into their budget, but they would actually administer the granting out to those other pages. They're doing it now.
Yeah, that's what DOC is happening now. But now it is, so I can get into the kind of mud of all of it. Like DOC grants out funding to a lot of these community service-based agencies. The Attorney General's office also grants out funding to do DCF grants out. And so these entities are kind of pulling all this stuff together to do all this programming. And wouldn't it be nice if there was a common vision among those three entities that are doing it, and how they work together?
That would have to be like an MOU.
Maybe that's what they're gonna come out with. This is the plan. Let's see what they can come up with.
Seems like a good step forward.
I hate to ask this question.
Oh, great. I'm live.
But it's trying to tie up, it's not, trying to find some cohesiveness with the community justice centers as well. With any of this.
Yes, they are listed as a main entity, a stakeholder in this. So again, this is not going to solve all of the problems and the issues. I see this as a starting point of let's get people in the room talking about this. We have a entity now, this council, and that they'll do these baby steps this year, hopefully, and then maybe it's something that we can build on.
And if they came up and agreed on an MOU kind of process for setting this all in place, that would be a big step forward all by itself, maybe.
That would be amazing, that'd be great. I don't want to plan on that, though.
Other questions? So you'll have the language definitely by when, tomorrow?
I think
you said?
Tonight, we're hoping to get it out, because then we have testimony scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. And assuming that there aren't any big changes or pushback from that language, then I think it's on the agenda to vote out on Friday.
So we need to sort of be in the loop on this.
Yep.
And Michelle, you're our liaison for judiciary, so I really recommend you go to.
Yeah, for tomorrow, it's after the floor.
After the floor,
So I should go watch the session?
go in the room.
Yeah, okay.
And also Troy should be notified so he could zoom in, because he's on COVID.
Yep.
If he's able to zoom in, so we have both of you there for our committee.
That'd be great.
And when you get that final, get the draft, you folks need to bring it back to us and go through it for us.
Yes.
On a piece of paper. To remember all this for tomorrow afternoon, because we have some time tomorrow afternoon. Or
We
is it
do, we
filling
just
up?
have BGS coming in at 2:30.
And you're taking this up right after the floor?
Yeah.
So you should have something by 3 o'clock, right?
A draft, or you mean,
Or some direction where.
oh, yeah, we should. Yeah,
we plan on that. But make sure that Troy also gets an invite, Zoom invite.
Yeah. I'll let our committee assistant know.
And have the show. Just,
I'll just go in.
that makes sense to the committee? Anything else? Thank you, Karen, for coming in on such
Yeah.
short notice.
Yeah. I couldn't give solid information, but at least know where it's going, so.
Yeah.
Tomorrow we'll have more information.
Yeah, I don't want to step ahead of your committee by saying language that you haven't brought before your committee yet.
I haven't even seen the final language yet, so. Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Couple things that want committee, kind of an update on some things, and then we can kind of have a conversation to see what people are thinking. Well, because we're gonna have some free time, and what people are thinking maybe we could fill in that time with. We've got two bills that we're not looking at, I mean, that we don't have physical possession of. But we've got S80, which dealt with the transfer of those federal dollars from the state revolving loan fund. This is Eric Black's world. The EPA, state revolving loan fund, the 1-to-5 match. Money we put in on the capital bill draws down $5 federal. And the language of the bill is in, call it Natural Resources Committee, it's the Environment Committee. They haven't had a chance to look at it, but we have sections 5 through 7 in there that pertain to the EPA state revolving loan fund. And if they make any changes to it, it potentially could impact our capital bill. It does not appear to impact our capital bill because the transfer of money is to go into another revolving fund, loan fund that goes specifically for private wastewater and private drinking water projects. And they want to transfer up to $275,000 of the federal portion of our EPA revolving loan funds to this. Remember that, folks? Remember that? Michael O'Grady came in, gave the walkthrough.
Yeah.
I'm seeing some blank looks.
Say it again. Because
Michael O'Grady came in last, I believe it was Thursday, Friday. And it's transferring money from the EPA state revolving loan fund, that's our clean water revolving loan fund, and our drinking water revolving loan fund. This is where we have the 1 to 5 match.
Yeah.
It's only putting the federal dollars into another fund. And those dollars, it's up to 275,000. And those dollars can be used to go out to privates. It could be private homeowner association, could be a mobile home, could be a private homeowner for replacing wastewater systems, septic systems, or drinking water systems, which could be wells.
And that's when I asked the question, would there be 275,000, is there only one? And who decides whether or not the federal money gets put into that fund? Is it here or is it at the agency?
Who decides?
Remember,
Because it says up to.
up to 275,000 of that money could be put into this fund.
Well, it can come from both funds to go into both funds.
Right, but my question was, and O'Grady was going back to, so that was a good question. Who will decide whether it goes in there? Is it this committee or is it the agency itself that decides? He didn't have an answer, but he said that was something that he was going on to talk about.
And then there is also the question of, it looks like it may be replacing fees.
Right. Whether or not it was replacing fees, because the fee bill hadn't been changed for quite some time.
So let me see, I'm searching and he did respond.
He didn't know the answer.
I know, but he reached out to Hannah Smith and a couple other people. And his email was, he said, our committee reviewed the sections pertaining to state revolving loan fund. What entity is approving whether or not the annual 275,000 deposited to the two funds is from fees, EPA pollution control, revolving loan fund, or a combination? Yeah, he didn't ask this question. Or you asked, who decides? He didn't ask that question. He asked about the fees.
He didn't know the answer.
I know, but he asked
And
DEC those questions, and he did not ask that question.
okay.
He was just talking about the funds. Not the person responded. He didn't ask that question. He asked the question about the fees. And is that 275 to offset a lack of fee increases? But he copied me on that email he sent. I don't see a response unless it came from Hannah Smith. So one thing that we should think about, regardless of your question and the fee question, there's no guardrails into this moving money. It always says up to 275, and there's no guardrails into how long they can do this. Is it open-ended? Should we put a stop date? Should we put a review to this?
Or do we intend to, because that's like emergency, 275,000 for emergency failures of septic systems, right? Or that's
It's
what they're-
private.
Private, that's what they're using this thing for. So the other question is, do you just merely want to have that stopped? And that bigger question would be, what is the anticipated annual number of cases and how much money on an annual basis would you expect to be drawn from there, so that we had a reserve fund that was that we kept stocked with enough money to cover each year? How much is that? And do we just maintain this as a fund to deal with emergencies? But we don't need to have a giant, we don't need to have a fund that's 10 times more than what the annual.
Well, the fund is already there. It's already set up for the purposes. The
Yeah.
fund's already there.
So they should have data.
The issue is this transfer of 275,000. Is that going to be ongoing, or do we put a deadline to that to review? That's the issue, because the fund's already there, and how the fund is used is already there in statute. This is just adding the money. Now, there was a response. I did do a search for Hannah Smith. And what entity is approving whether or not the annual 275 is deposited? And her answer is DEC will make that determination. And then talking about, is the 275 to offset a lack of fees? And the purpose of this proposal, this is the answer. The purpose of this proposal is to fund the Vermont wastewater and potable water revolving loan fund with funds from the EPA pollution controlling revolving fund, which is our 1 to 5 match, in order to preserve permit fee funds to pay for DEC program operational costs.
Okay. So they want to leverage the money, and they have other costs that have to take state dollars. They want to save those state dollars to take their costs they are unable to leverage money to deal with.
They don't want to have to use permit fees for the operational costs.
Right. The DEC permit fees are state dollars, 100%.
The operational permit fees depends who you're charging the fee to. You have to find out who you're charging. Is it folks who are submitting permits? Is it licensing of folks that pay the fee? You have to determine who's paying that fee.
Well, I understand that part, but when the dollars come in, they're deemed state dollars available to match other kinds of money.
Well, they might be, but
like
it revolves to go back out to other projects. It's revolving loan funds.
Right, but they said they're trying to preserve the fee dollars for other purposes, right? And so they like to put those ARPA dollars or those federal dollars into that fund so they can preserve the state dollars for purposes that they can't use the federal dollars for.
Well, that's how you're interpreting it, but that may not be what's actually happening. We don't know. I'll forward these funds to you folks and see who gets this email.
But really, the only thing that matters in my mind is that they leverage as much money as possible.
So do we want to keep it open-ended? But that's our policy from now on, and not do a check-in. It's open-ended right now. We're saying we give this authority from now on, up to 275,000 will be transferred from our EPA revolving loan funds to these other funds, the wastewater and the potable water, to go out to privates. We want to do a look-see in a few years to see how that's working. It's pretty open-ended right now.
Yeah, I think it's wise.
Because if we do, we need to put some language together, to offer the language to House Environment.
Yeah. 2 years, 3 years.
Look into the committee.
Couple of years, yeah.
At least 2 years probably, because that way you have track record. Because we need to have a track record of what's going in and going out of that fund for more than 1 year. 2 would be fine.
So you could do a sunset in 2 years. It's like we did with some of the others.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to folks?
Yes.
So would that be July 1st, 26?
And we
We have
won't,
to get in touch with Michael.
we won't forget about it that way too.
There'll be a new body, be a new legislature, then they get to be as confused as we are. So I just sent everyone Hannah Smith's response to my board rating. So I want to make sure that you folks got it. So can you check your legislative email?
I get it.
You got it, Wayne?
Yep.
You got it? Let's check your legislative email. You got it, Gina?
Yeah.
Slack. Mary's looking. Eric, Michelle,
I haven't got that screen up.
you haven't got it? How about
Still
you,
loading.
Eric? You got it? John, did you get it? Yes. So I don't know why you haven't got the others. I just don't understand why you
Yeah,
haven't
we
got
get
the others.
Phil's the other one. But no, never got it.
So the other bill that we're looking at is the forensic one. The forensic facility. I think that's S89.
Yes.
Yes. So we're trying to get a handle on the Medicaid funding for the mental health beds, the 16 beds. We did find someone later on this week.
Friday at 8:30.
So I tell we could find somebody to come in and talk about Medicaid funding. So let me put on the table, some of us have dealt with this for a number of years by replacing the state hospital and then trying to put in the secure residential. CMS is the one that will determine if you get Medicaid funding for these beds, for beds in the mental health system. If you go over 16 beds, CMS sees that as an IMD, which is an Institute of Mental Disease. And they don't fund a facility if it's over 16 beds through Medicaid dollars. Okay, that's the bottom line. And then you build from there. I don't know if that is still true. It has been true since the 60s about the 16-bed designation. You go over that, you don't get Medicaid funding. For if you have it 20 beds, you don't get Medicaid funding for 20 beds, not those 4, but for 20. So when we built the state hospital in Berlin, it was originally for 16 beds. And the push said 16 beds isn't going to be enough in our mental health system. So there were negotiations that the administration at that point entered into with CMS to get a waiver. So there was a waiver that we could go up to 25 beds. So we built a facility that had 2 wings. There were 8 beds each. And then another wing that was 9 beds. And that other wing had 2 sections, one with 5 beds and one with 4 beds. We had a waiver for those extra 9 beds, so we could receive Medicaid funding for that. Is everyone following me at this point? So what the testimony that we received from DMH last week is indicating that waiver, the CMS is working away from the waivers. So anything over 16 beds, they're not going to get waivers for. This will impact the Brattleboro retreat at some point. So we've had to wean ourselves off of expecting a waiver. When you get a waiver, those beds are paid for by Medicaid, not the general fund. If you lose Medicaid funding for those beds, it's all on the general fund. So when the hospital, the old hospital was decertified with CMS, we no longer got Medicaid dollars for those beds. That was all on the general fund. So that's a little side step. So getting back to this current state hospital, right now, those 9 beds that we received the waivers for, according to the testimony we received last week, has gone away. So those 9 beds right now are being paid for by general fund dollars. The other 16 beds are still paid for through Medicaid. Okay. Got that?
Yep.
So. I'm gonna do a little sidestep, a little bit. When we had Woodside. When Woodside was operating, we received Medicaid dollars. Towards the end, when CMS came in and inspected the programming and what was being provided there at Woodside, they said, this is an incarcerated facility. We're pulling your Medicaid. So Woodside ended up being paid for through the general fund. Okay? So my concern, and I may be off base here, but I've been around this a while, with replacing the state hospital and replacing the secure residential. We have a building in Berlin, a physical building with 3 wings. We have 1 entry point for those 3 wings currently. We have a sally port, and we have an area where people are admitted. And the services are provided to those folks in those 3 wings. So the plan is to convert 9 beds to a forensic unit, not someone who has been sentenced to serve there. It's someone who's going through that process, hasn't been sentenced, but has mental health issues, and either is incompetent to stand trial or is using the insanity defense.
Could it be new sentencing?
Yeah.
Because of insanity, like they're not.
But if they're sentenced, they're not gonna go there. So the question is, what DMH said to us last week, those 9 beds were already paying through the general fund. So a forensic unit would not change that. It was, the forensic unit would still be paid for through the general fund. When I heard that asking, is there enough space in this wing to provide services to those 9 folks? Meals, and they said, well, meals are served in your rooms anyway. Programming needs in terms of space, well, they might be going into the state hospital space to use that. That immediately set off a red flag for me, because would that put in jeopardy our Medicaid dollars for those 16 beds? Because it would have, with a secure residential, when we were looking at placing the secure residential just half a mile as a crow flies from the state hospital, CMS was like, wait a minute, we can see that building and you might lose your waiver. You might not get Medicaid coverage for your 16-bed secure residential. That's why we didn't build it there. Wayne.
What are they doing? I mean, it seems nonsensical, going to cite differences between 2 buildings. It's one thing if the programming wasn't applicable. It's one thing if you were commingling 2 types of people that somehow might interact with each other. But, you know,
It's CMS, it's federal. I can't answer it.
and
It's CMS and it's federal.
what's the names for the acronym? CMS.
Center for Medical Services, and that's what oversees Medicare and Medicaid.
So
So
don't,
anyone who's on Medicare in this room is through CMS.
so don't ask any rational questions.
So if they had that concern with a building that was not physically connected, what are the implications? And this is what we need to ask. What are the implications with this 9-wing that is physically attached to the 16 beds? And if you're saying that some of the space in the hospital is going to be shared, is that triggering an issue? Are we going to share any staff? Is that going to trigger an issue to lose Medicaid for the current 16 mental health beds? Those are the questions we need to ask in this committee. Connor.
I think the frustrating thing, and go back myself in the state hospital, is CMS ain't gonna tell you until you build the thing, right? And even then, it's a bit like subjective, right? It's like, and I was wondering when they were presenting the other day, I didn't get a ton of clarity, like, is it run by DMH? Is it run by DOC? Well, it's kind of jointly
My
like that.
question, is it being run by the inmates?
No,
No, I mean
they're not
CMS.
inmates.
I mean, this.
They're not inmates.
CMS.
But I think of it, the DMH, those are 9 DMH beds, and legally it has to be something,
But
you
they're gonna
know?
be licensed under GMH and Dale.
Yeah, I think it's pretty sticky, you know?
But they should have they should have a clear-cut criteria. This is legal, or this is acceptable, this is not. This is acceptable, this is not. It should be
When
parsed
you want to go to
out.
Washington for us? Talk to them.
So the questions that we also have to do, and we're gonna set up time with BGS, they're coming in tomorrow.
You're
right?
coming in tomorrow, and Ashley Berliner from Vermont Department of Health Access is coming in Friday.
So I've asked the commissioner of BGS, what is the space there? Because that's our jurisdiction of the bill. What is the space? I heard there's a back door, because I've asked people, how are they coming and going? Well, there's a back door. Okay, so I asked the commissioner. What back door for who? For the 9 beds. I said to the commissioner of BGS, so I heard there's a back door. She said, yeah, that back door goes out to the rec area that I'm aware of. I said, okay, so someone is coming in for the forensic unit. How are they going to enter the building? Are they coming in through the main entrance because that's shared use? Are they going to use the Sally port that's currently there? How are they going to be admitted to the building? And then I want them to go through what space is available in this 9-bed unit currently. So they're coming in tomorrow to talk about that. That's our view of what we need to focus on S89. Because the program for the forensic piece is supposed to be up and running by July of 24.
It's pretty fast.
If the program is up and they think they can just use these beds, are there renovations that are need to occur? That's what we need to ask. That's our jurisdiction.
Well, I wish you had all been next door because I just came from S89. Because I had
You were
people
over there?
testifying. One of the families of a victim from Bennington. And I have to tell you, it is not a good thing. And I've known it for a long time. That's why I've advocated for this, is that it is not good to mix the population. Even if they're separated within a building, we all know things can happen. And again, this isn't a huge population. These are the extreme of the extreme. And, you want them to be where they're getting those services. I mean, the guy that did the murder almost 2 years ago in Bennington, he's now back into the prison system and is going to go through, I guess, the trial now, possibly.
Because he was taking comfort.
Well, he was always using that as the insanity plea. And so now he's back in jail and is going to be, they're going to be looking at possibly going to a trial or going through the steps to get to that or not. But this isn't for a huge population, but I'm concerned that we are taking beds away from people with mental health issues at that hospital that was specifically for that, to kind of try to blend another group in, which I really, my humble opinion is I don't think you should be having them on the same side. I really don't. I mean, we heard from several families this afternoon, and horrific. I mean, horrific. And a history of planning and actually knowing what they were doing to the letter. So you put them in a facility there, whether they're coming in the Sally port, the front door, or the back door. These folks are pretty clever. And, you know, and I feel bad that they've got, you know, what they're dealing with, but this is not a good situation.
So my understanding from what I've heard over the years, and I think we asked this the other day, some of the folks that would be in the forensic beds are already there in the mental health beds to begin with. There's also a couple, 3 people already. That's what I heard.
And they aren't using all of the 25 beds. They don't have, like right now, I mean, like Callis was saying, there's 3 wings
Right, but.
and they're
have
all
staff.
secure. So if you go, even if you go to the retreat, they have different wings.
Right.
Each wing is very locked
No, I know.
and very separate. And the idea of, you think about these other places, sorry, I jumped in and you didn't call me. You know, like to build the secure residential in Essex has taken us what, like 3 years, 4 years, once we finally approve the model, but like forever.
Right.
Here we have a space where we have more beds than we're using for the highest need population. And if we could keep those 9 beds for one designated purpose and 16 other beds for another purpose, and maybe we do have to do some renovations to make the exit separate, you know, but compared to building a whole new different building, if we could still get the funding, I think it would be the quickest way to deal with some people who really need to be in a safe and secure space
Oh, yeah.
for their
Oh,
own sake
right.
and also for public safety.
Oh,
And
agree.
I just feel like the time is of the essence. And if this could work, at least for the foreseeable future, this might be a good place to start, because anything else is going to take us 5 or 8 or God knows how many years.
And I agree. My only concern is, as I believe at one point, I'm not sure if that's the case now, the other beds were not full because they couldn't get staff. So I'm really concerned, do we have the staff that's going to be able to deal with the forensic folks the way they should, when we can't even get staff to do the hospital the way it is now? Because they said that several times. The reason the one wing was, there were a lot less beds. They didn't have the staff. You've got to have, for this population, staff and the programming to work with them and the medications and everything else. You've got to have that on, and if we don't have that, you know, we're rowing up the river without, and you know, any oars or anything going in a direction. You know, that's what's going to end up stopping us. We've got to have things in place that's going to work for everyone. You know.
Eric?
I just want to emphasize everything that Mary was saying, because that's accurate. That is a much higher level of care and scope of practice, and they should not be convoluted and put together. There is no other state that I am aware of, and I am going to look that up this evening and do my research in the regards of whether or not they are operated within the same compound, if you want to call it that. They don't exist, and this is a serious, if something were to occur, the liability and the lawsuits would be just phenomenal. And I think we should all, as you said, also, Madam Chair, let's learn from Woodside.
Tristan and then Wayne and then Michelle.
Yeah, I think this idea, if the funding will be there, just seems like we're not gonna know until we go ahead, which risks a lot.
You mean the funding, Medicare, Medicaid funding for the 16 beds?
Correct.
You're never gonna get Medicaid funding for those not.
Right, but we might risk it for all of them in doing it to share the concerns of, does this facility make sense?
Wayne and then Michelle.
So I could see, again, with the mystery of CMS and over their criteria, but I could see building a separate Sally port. I could see walling everything off and having no way that there could be any intermixing of those populations. Maybe, there's a wall between the end, but it's a wall that's not impenetrable wall of some sort. That doesn't mean that CMS isn't gonna look at it and say, oh, it's 10 miles away, but we can see that building, so you get
Be
problems.
50 miles.
Could be 50 miles away,
That was the other
as long as you can see it. So
With Fletcher Allen, remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
we can't anticipate that, but then there could be some benefits if they would tell us, because you already talked about the programming, and you got some people like the medications and that sort of stuff. I could see sharing staff between the two facilities on that medication stuff, because it should be identical, right?
We don't know that.
We don't
We
know
don't
that,
know.
and that's what you've got to have staff for both populations, and that's what I'm really, really, really concerned, and I'm sorry I'm talking without being acknowledged. But you've got to have, so that they're getting the programming they need and the care, as well as the other folks. And like I said, my biggest concern is that they haven't had the staff for just even what they're dealing with now. This is a whole very different population that needs, real care and programming and the medications. They even talked about like a hub and spoke type of, for folks so that they're, because a lot of these folks get off their medication and then that accelerates to the next, anyway, I apologize if I jumped in front of someone.
Michelle and then Connor?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I totally agree that mixing people who are violent and in a mental health struggle and are involuntarily hospitalized and people who are involuntarily hospitalized because they're in a mental health struggle, but who are not violent, putting them in the same space, in the same wing is not ideal. And that's what we have right now. So right now there's 16 beds and 2 of them are people that you can look them up. I can show you in the news what their stories are. They have killed other people. And they are there along with people who are having mental health struggles that are long-term and serious, and they're considered a danger to themselves, maybe a danger to others. It's not delineated. The cases would know, but there are certainly people who are there that are not a danger to others. And by being there, they are in danger by being around those other people who have a history of violence. And I spent a lot of years of my life as a volunteer working with NAMI Vermont as a volunteer for families and doing education about mental health services. I know a lot of people who have been involuntarily hospitalized or whose kids have been, and they are not people who have been violent or harmful to others. They are much more likely to be victimized than to hurt anybody else. But right now, those 16 people, I don't know how many people are there, but of those 16 beds, some of them are being filled with people who are violent, who would meet the definition of this forensic thing. So it's like many things we look at in this committee. Would it be ideal to have 9 over here and 16 over here? No. But is it better to have a special staff dealing with this extra population who have been proven to be dangerous? I think it would be, because we're really not doing a service to the other people that are hospitalized on that side who are being in there in the same space with the people who have a proven record of being horribly violent. And so to me, it just feels like the time is of the essence. We need to figure out, and yes, we need staffing. And that's going to be a problem, whether we build a new facility in it, 5 miles away, 100 miles away, 500 miles away, anywhere in the state of Vermont, the staffing is going to be hard. But if we could make this work with 9 here, 16 here, separate, and we could still keep the funding, I believe it would be the fastest route to having a solution for the people who have mental health struggles and have been proven to be dangerous.
I am really interested in this issue. It's you represented psych techs and correctional officers. Psych techs had about 2 or 3 times the workers' comp rates, the COs did. So it is kind of interesting talking about the 2 populations. But I guess I wonder, what is our scope of this committee? What's our jurisdiction?
I'm
Because
getting there.
I'm very interested in this, but are we just the CMS piece of it,
I'm getting there. I'm just letting folks know. So our scope is the building. Okay. And right now, we're not getting into the program. That is judiciary and
Human services involved.
Human services is involved in the disability piece.
Right.
Okay. So Martin is kind of trying to figure out, he'd like to vote the bill out quickly. I said, we've really got to look at this building piece, because if there's any renovations that need to occur, we need to figure this out. So for us, the question is, and that's why we're having the commissioner of DGS coming in tomorrow, so we can see what the facility looks like. Where's the entry point? Where are they going to be admitted? Where are they going to be screened and gone through the admitting process? Where's the salary? Because there's going to need to be a salary. they're coming in a law enforcement car. You gotta use the same. Where is the programming? The other thing too, this is another issue that's new to you folks here, except for Mary and Michelle and myself, EIPs, emergency involuntary procedures. Those are physical restraints. Those are soft rooms. When we initially were building the secure residential up in Essex, we had EIPs, and we were incorporating that in the building. The EIPs then were decided not to be done there, so we reconfigured the building. So if they're doing, and they said they'd be doing EIPs, they indicated there was a soft room there in the wing with the 9 beds. But is there other items that are needed in that wing, building-wise, to allow EIPs to be used?
What's the EIP now?
Emergency involuntary procedures. It's hands-on by the staff. Secure residential in Middlesex, in Essex does not allow that. So those are questions about the building aspect of that wing. And that's what we need to focus on, because if we have to do renovations, it's like, we have no money in the capital for this.
It's going to happen for renovations.
Or do we wait till next year? And I said to Martin, he said, well, the program isn't going to be up and running till next July. I said, well, you're not going to do renovations in 4 weeks.
Right.
Well, maybe we'll postpone it for another year if it needs renovations.
Cool.
So we're, you're looking at liability, as you pointed out. If we got people already co-mixed that are real danger to others, if they ever came in contact and you had a murder in there, what kind of liability does the state have? And so judging the magnitude of that versus what it costs for us to do something, you have to sort of look at your risks versus your costs. And what's our alternative? If this won't work, what do we have to do?
This bill has been working through the Senate since January, and I've asked right along, where are you going to put the beds? Where are you going to put the people? And there was never a real answer. People were kind of thinking, maybe these beds at the state hospital. I believe this was a floor amendment to use these numbers.
Well, it didn't have to be.
It came from Human Services in the Senate, I believe. Correct me on that one, I'm not sure, but I think it was a floor amendment, as well as including disability folks. That was a floor amendment as well. But that's what the bill looks like now. And we have to work with what came over from the other body. Okay. So our role,
So a well thought out plan with an amendment on the floor.
What we call the building the plane and flying at the same time.
There you go.
to the legislature.
I've never heard of a plane flying and I was building at the same time.
So our role right
Stress
now
kids.
is looking at the use of that space and what is going to be needed. And what does that building, that wing provide? And
So-
what renovations?
So we need to talk to Joe Aja and say, let's,
Well, BGS is coming in tomorrow. I had a conversation with the commissioner today. And I said, hey, this is what I'm hearing. What is going on? Is there a back door that's accessible? She said, I think it might be back door to the right area. And I said, so how are folks going to be entering in? So those are things we have to ask about. And that's why I wanted to lay out the groundwork. And it's all under, in my thing, and I may be all wet, I may be all wrong in this. But we got to ensure we don't lose Medicaid funding for those 16
Because
beds.
that would not be good.
And what do we do to not jeopardize that?
that's not in our jurisdiction.
Well, it sort of is if you're looking at a building. You have to know the ramifications of your construction.
And what's the annual operating cost of the facility? Would be interesting to know because,
Of the 9 beds for the forensic,
well, no, of the 16,
oh, we could ask that if we can.
because that's what you'd have to spend general fund money
I can't
on.
remember.
Most of the tier 1 beds, like at the retreat, are between 1,600 and 2,000 a day.
Yeah,
per bed.
I mean, I can't remember how many.
But I don't know on top of that what it costs to run the facility.
That's 52 bits.
It's,
It
it was like 30 million.
It
wasn't
was,
Yeah.
that was back then.
Yeah, I think it was around 30
30
million,
million
when it
annual
was
budget.
52 at Waterbury, but that was 15 years ago.
Wow, Waterbury.
I think the frustrating thing on this one is we're absolutely building towards what beds we have available rather than what is the actual need of this, It's 9 beds because that's 9 beds left over at the hospital if you take it off the 16. But how many people in corrections right now really could use that level of care or outside corrections?
But if they were in
Yeah.
corrections, that's your big forensic unit. That's your big F. You got 2 forensics. You got your little F and you got your big F.
Mhm.
Your big F are those who have been sentenced. Your little Fs, they haven't been sentenced,
Mhm.
but they're in a category where they're in the criminal justice system. Either they're not competent to stand trial or they're insane at the time of the crime. So there's a difference.
Yeah, no, sure enough. It just seems coincidental that 9 is exactly what we need.
Oh, yeah, but then-
And it could be it could be, maybe they're thinking of a longer term plan, but you need something short term.
That's how I heard the Senate Judiciary talk about it, was that this would be a way we could start it more quickly. And then we could look to
That
the
makes me
future
feel
of what
better.
we really needed.
Heard from the OCU.
They're not DOC folks. They're not DOC folks. They've not been sentenced.
So we have an immediate emergent need, it seems. Not something we can wait 5 to 7 years for.
So that's what we have to balance, and we need to really look at the building and make sure that there's enough separation and that there's enough space in the 9 bed to do the programming and the EIPs that they want to do.
So should we go see it after we hear? No, I mean, I've been there a couple, well. not as a
Jennifer could give us
patient.
Jennifer could give us a
Sometimes I
tour,
We've been
a
there.
virtual
We've
tour.
been there. I've been there a
Well, let me
couple
see,
of
it was
times.
kind of hard just to set up, seeing the Waterbury complex.
I've been in Waterbury back in the old days.
Oh, gosh, the last time I saw.
Yeah, well, it
the
looks real
tunnel.
different now.
Yeah,
The tunnels have all been filled.
yeah.
It was in the morning after Irene.
60s.
It was rough.
Really?
So
Oh,
anyway,
my
I
God.
just wanted to lay this out for folks so we can really focus our attention and our questions when BGS is here. And also to give you a little understanding, I may be all wet on the Medicaid thing and the CMS, but I'm just looking back from 2005, and Connor was involved in this too, of when we were trying to replace the state hospital up with a facility with Fletcher Allen. And the IMD was an issue there because it was within a 50-mile radius. And we might not get Medicaid for that. And then that went by the wayside. And then the flood happened. And then replacing that brought all those issues back to life. And this committee was in the hub of that, right in the center. So I may be all wet on the CMS and IMD and Medicaid, but unless it's changed,
It's far better to potentially be all wet than not consider it and then have people say, why didn't you consider this?
Well, we're just taking it, you know.
so that's the frame of our questions, if that helps the committee at all. So we're kind of done unless people want to think about what other items do you want to talk about? We've got a lot of free time coming
I
up,
got one, Madam Chair.
so let's not go off YouTube yet. Tristan.
Prison labor and commissary. Just been hearing from some advocates. This is something.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm doing that thing. Prison labor and commissary telephone use. These are some topics I've been hearing from advocates that use it
Prison labor in what way?
in terms of circumstances, the pay, what inmates have paid and the circumstances under which we're employing them, just to understand.
Speak up.
Understanding the prison labor system we have in Vermont and what we pay and the circumstances under which folks are employed, commissary, phone calls, how these things work with what incarcerated persons have access to, what they pay, what the state gets back, how the contracts work. These are really interesting topics. I'd say that I've certainly been hearing from advocates that they'd like the committee to take a look at. Is that of interest?
We can do that if people are interested. We've done,
See, we listen an awful lot to advocates, but we don't seem to hear that much from all the victims. That bothers me,
Well,
because
5 people in that office, it's not a lot they can do, is there? What do we?
well, I mean, the problem as I see it, because we have all kinds of people out there that have been victimized, that are grieving one way or the other. And we spend an awful lot of time concerning ourselves with the people that are under our care, which is appropriate. But part of the reason why it's so difficult to get them housed out in communities, the remembrances of the victimization. And so just keeping that in mind, because it hinders our ability to move forward out in the community.
so are folks interested in hearing from DOC on the commissary issue, as well as their work programs and what they pay for the work programs?
I would be. I would also be interested in talking with them about what I was talking to you about at the break in terms of programming and outdoor time, particularly in the summer, because it feels like these are all kind of interconnected quality of life issues for people that are incarcerated. And I'd be happy to have a conversation about that with the commissioner or someone else representing DOC here.
Yeah.
I will once again request, I would like to hear from a peer support team.
Peer supportive team within corrections,
Yes.
not the pathways or
Peer
anything.
supportive team within corrections.
I'd like to hear from them too. That'd be cool. I'd like to hear from them too.
The peer support.
Yeah, curious about that.
That's
you
for
have to hear from
staffing,
all
or is
sides.
that for the offenders? Because
The peer supportive team that was brought to the forefront after the investigation conducted by Downs Rackle, minor report that came out, the peer supportive team. That's who I like to hear from.
The
I
staff.
know exactly who I'm talking about. The peer
No, I
supportive
don't. I'd
team.
like some clarity, because there's a few different items here. Is it peer support that is occurring for the staff specifically? The peer-to-peer for the staff specifically, or are you talking about the monitoring commission
The peer supportive team for the staff.
for the staff? Okay. Because we put that into language to codify that. We did that through the workforce study.
But that monitoring commission is not in place, is it?
Yes, it's a place, but it's not our purview.
Peer support team.
So I'm hearing commissary, I'm hearing the work programs and what they're reimbursed for. I'm hearing time outside and having volunteers come in.
Well, programming
Program.
programming that's available to individuals.
Did we hear from, we have someone in that did
No,
that
it's
now?
Kim Bullshit. We talked about that on the programming, but your angle was more outside time and volunteers coming in, and do they need staff?
Well, the outside, I mean, what I was thinking about in particular today was just that with the weather being as it is, it's a nice time for people to have some time outside. And I have had people contact me and say their family members aren't getting outside. So what would be possible? What would it take to make it possible for individuals to go outside daily and maybe do a garden or something like that? Because some of the facilities are able to do that, but some of them aren't. So how do some make it work if other ones can't? you know, because it seems like that's a quality of life thing that might not be that complicated, but maybe it is. Maybe it is because they don't have the right staff.
That's a little different than looking at their programming. That's why I want clear.
Okay, I just meant like having a garden when you go outside.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Okay.
even doing some kind of activities like basketball outside. Like if you're outside, there are a variety of things that could be available.
And then the peer-to-peer support.
Switching off corrections briefly, if that's okay. I'd love human resources to come in at some point. And sort of talk about their strategic planning with state employee telecommuting and how that relates to physical space in state buildings. Because that's going to impact us for years going down the line here. So how are they making these decisions? Have they decided at this point, anybody who's teleworking is going to continue to telework, or is that going to be pulled back at some point?
Is it human resources that makes that decision for all departments and agencies, or is some agencies and departments making that without human resources?
Some departments don't like human resources too cozy in with them. So it might be independent, but they should be a one-stop shop on it.
I don't know. So of course, having them an administrator, the FaceTime with people is an important thing. And in order to do that, so I would hate to have it solely in human services hands, whether or not my staff were able to work from home. Because human services do not know the details of everything that your staff is responsible for, or how they interact on a day-to-day basis with yourself and the other staff there. So that's a slippery slope to.
We sure miss the employees in downtown Montpelier here at lunchtime, but I'm not expressing really a preference one way or the other. I just like to know the thinking that's going into this.
Yeah, Steve, sometimes it's perfectly fine. I've worked remotely, on some things for a long time. It depends on the employee. It depends on the tasks that the employee is charged with, because a lot of tasks are very amenable to remote. Other ones that require more interaction like this that we're having here, we already know what happens when we go on Zoom. Our discussions are not as robust as they are when we're here.
Right. Except when we're on YouTube right now.
Yeah.
So we've got 4 or 5 items. Other thoughts? And Phil's keeping track of them, right? Maybe we could get DOC in sometime this week on some of these, possibly, or HR. Possibly.
We don't have a lot of
Time.
time slots available.
Well, we got Thursday morning and Friday and Wednesday afternoon. At this point.
Thursday morning is full.
Yeah.
Wednesday afternoon, we have 2 items already.
In there. And Thursday afternoon, forgot. Anything else for folks would you be interested in? Now's the time. We got this week and next week, and then
I
after
think
that.
5 is enough, because I think if we load it up too much, we're going to only slightly do a little bit of each. And I'd rather probably have a little bit more detail for each one so that we've got a good base.
So I have one specific recommendation, which is there's this program that I've heard about but not had a chance to explore very much, which is in Connecticut, called Emerge, which is a reentry program for women who have been recently released from prison. And it has residential supports, it has mental health supports, it has job supports, it has all kinds of different things. And it's a different and more intensive model than I'm aware of us offering anywhere in Vermont. I remember a couple of years ago, and I think actually even at the beginning of this year, we did sort of a virtual walkthrough of what the program in Maine offered, so that we could kind of start to get a sense of what was involved in their model. I would love to have that, just to give us all sort of like a little dose for half an hour of what do they do, and sort of get our juices flowing a little bit in terms of possibilities for Vermont, because I think it's important. And I was planning to look into it myself this summer, but I would love to have everybody look at it. Yeah.
Is there a contact name?
I'd have to look it up. Somebody I know from the Community Justice Center in Brattleboro visited, but it's probably just going to be the contact on the website, but I can give the information to Phil.
Great, thank you.
Anything else? So that's a full plate. 5 plus the 6 items. Other thoughts?
Do you have any feel when we might see the Capitol go come out of the Senate?
I would say the end of April.
2024.
Well, the budget's supposed to be out of Senate approach by Friday. So usually the capital bill
Right behind
is
it.
right around that
usually,
time. So I would say, I haven't checked with Russ, we've got to check with him. I've just kind of been standing back and letting them just do their work. I would anticipate probably towards the end of next week, to have some feel of where they are. It may be, I don't know, that I'm just kind of looking, you know, we've only got 3 more weeks.
Exactly. So basically, the beginning of May, all of a sudden, the workload is going to pick up significantly, trying to reconcile their version and our version.
And that we'll have to figure out if we can, there's so many changes that we don't concur in a conference committee.
Yep.
Or we concur with further proposal amendment. But we're gonna be so tied into appropriations committee that I don't know where we're gonna go. Yeah, I think we just need to see where the
Until we see
state,
what they're doing.
see where the state budget is, see what they're doing. And, you know, circumstances with it being tied to both committees may automatically choose a direction. I don't know. It's too early to tell. Anything else before we close up shop? Okay, let's go off of YouTube. We're back here tomorrow. Well, we're not here. We're not gonna be on YouTube tomorrow. 8:30, we're gonna meet down at the coat room and then we'll figure out who's driving where, but we're gonna go out to the Waterbury complex and do a tour of that facility, as well as the state police headquarters and the forensic unit. Make sure you have your IDs with you, state IDs, so that we can get into those facilities.
And I have my trucks, I'm willing